Welcome, Christopher. Welcome, Blake. Awesome. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and get started. But before we get started, join the Discord, please. These are just going to be like kind of some house cleaning, kind of like make sure that everybody is kind of aware of what's going on. So first off, before we get started into the talk, please join the Discord. I would say 90% of the activity of what's going on within the Foundry starts in the Discord at least. So definitely be sure you're there. I will be dropping my Calendly link as well as the deck for this presentation with a ton of further reading inside of the Discord. So definitely check that out. I would strongly encourage you to schedule a one-on-one. So if you haven't already talked to Sam or myself, then I would say go ahead and talk to us, right? Like, we just kind of love knowing what people are building in the space, what you're thinking, etc. But also, it's really, really helpful. Basically, we sit down with you, we kind of figure out what you're looking for, what you want to get out of the 6 weeks, and then we make sure that you get that out of this Foundry. Whether it's starting a company, whether it's finding a project to contribute to, all of these things are really kind of like our priority within this program. But we can only really make sure that you accomplish that if we talk to you and we kind of get an idea for what you're looking for. So in order to get a Calendly link, I'm going to be posting it on the Discord. DM me on the Discord, just Zach. I'm also on Twitter at zherring, so you can DM me there, and I can share the link as well. Finally, I'm going to say check out community.xyz. We're going to actually be covering some of the really interesting features within community.xyz and how you can use them in building your product. But honestly, if you want to get a sense for what is being built, if you maybe even want to start thinking about contributing to projects, let's say you don't necessarily have an idea, or you want to kind of start feeling out Arweave before you start building your product on Arweave, community.xyz and the opportunities board is actually a fantastic place to start getting a feel for it. So Discord, community, those are really good places. And then also schedule your one-on-one. So without further ado, in search of the mythical Dapp user, an extremely 0 to 1 approach in finding strangers and converting them to users. A little bit about me. I'm a product and design founder. I'm also a product strategist. What does a strategist mean? It's just this fancy way of saying I help teams get out of their own way. I look at the problems from outside of their own heads and prioritize the most important thing and ignore the rest. If you've talked to me this week, you've probably heard me say already, and I apologize for repeating myself, when you're building a company, there's thousands of things you could be doing. There's probably only 1 to 3 things that you actually should be focusing on at any given moment. Building a company is it's an exercise in energy management. You only have so much runway. You only have so much time. You only have so many hours in the day. And so it's focusing the resources that you have to the goal that you're looking to accomplish. I've been working as an advisor and entrepreneur for about 12 years, both in-house and as a consultant, some pixelated logos because of NDAs on the Web 2 side, as well as a whole bunch of kind of like B2B and B to prosumer type companies, as well as in the Web3 space. I have to basically update this deck because there's a ton of companies that have changed their names. 3box, so I think 3box Labs now, Atomic Loans is now Atomic Finance. But I've been really, really fortunate to work with some really amazing companies in the space, including Arweave. So let's just kind of get to it. Why are Dapp users mythical? Why? I'm a Dapp user. I'm not mythical, right? I say mythical essentially because there are so few of them. They're like unicorns. They're rare. This screenshot was taken in October 2020 when I first gave this talk. If you look at the top dApps based off of monthly active users over a 30-day rolling basis, you see, oh, wow, 500,000 users for the top one, an almost half drop for the next. And then you see you get down into the into 30,000 by slot number 4. If you continue to go down into the 30s, you start seeing 1.9, 1.8, 1.7 from companies that I consider successful in the space, right? It's kind of crazy to think of how few users there are in the space. And obviously, like, these screenshots were taken in October 2020. You might be thinking, Zach, that wasn't before. That was pre-bull market run. Bitcoin wasn't hovering around 50K, right? Surely things are better now. Yes and no. Dapp Radar put out a study in Q2 of 2020 saying that monthly active users have actually increased 100% to 1.2 million, I think, at the end of Q2. That's great. 100% increase. That's really cool. But also, kind of on the flip side, a bull run hasn't necessarily improved things. This screenshot, same dashboard, was taken 30 days ago, and we actually see a dramatic decline in monthly active users, where there's only one Dapp that was breaking 100 over 100K in monthly active users, and the rest are kind of in the 40s and 30s. Maybe this has to do with rising network costs. Maybe this is different. Maybe we're kind of seeing a diffusion of those 1.2 million users into alternative chains, since L2 rollouts have kind of been a little disjointed on the Ethereum side. So there's a lot of reasons that this could be happening, but I think it's just important to understand that, like, while the pie is growing, it isn't necessarily growing at the speed that makes, I don't know, we're all fighting essentially for the same users in the space if you aren't proactively thinking about building for people outside of the crypto space. Another really interesting data point, Rick Burton, right? November 22nd, 2020, he said these are only around 30 ERC20 contracts that have more than 50 daily active addresses interacting with them. This goes to show how early Ethereum still is. We're still early. It's easy to think you've missed the boat. From whenever Bitcoin's at $50,000 and then has stayed that way for longer than I was expecting it to. But so it's easy to feel like you've missed the boat. But in terms of market maturity and like the actual user, the actual customer base within the space, we're still crazy early. So what I'm going to outline to you is extremely counterintuitive in crypto. It feels counterintuitive. Okay. Why is that? I don't know. If you were around during the summer, the DeFi summer, the degen summer, this is going to feel weird, right? You saw people YOLO smart contracts over the weekend and get $1 billion in total locked value. So it's going to feel weird. But also, guess what? Some of the people that have who are kind of notorious for like being able to build protocols and immediately find a user base, even they think real users are scarce, right? Andre wrote a fantastic Building a DeFi Sucks series, talking about just like the frustrations of building for an extremely narrow audience. So even rock stars put their pants on one leg at a time. Even rock stars have problems finding users in the space. So the teams that I have worked on that have taken this tact end up finding a lot of they find traction, right, because of a couple of different things that we'll be going over in the talk. I don't necessarily want to front load that. So first, a disclaimer: user acquisition encompasses a lot, and I'm familiar with the sliver. I'm really good at that sliver, but there's literally hundreds of books written on user acquisition, and it depends on where you are in the customer scaling, customer acquisition sort of life cycle of your product. So I don't necessarily want you to think, oh, this is all there is to it. This is not all there is to it. I've read I want to say I've read maybe 15 to 20 books on the space, or on these specifically. I know that there's probably easily 150 worth reading, and then tens of thousands. There's tons of YouTube videos, right? So you can continue to kind of look into that. But this is a sliver. When you think of a hierarchy of growth, like when you have 0 users, that's kind of where we're focusing on right now. That's sort of my sweet spot, is on both the user research and the community side. User research plus biz dev, 5 to 30 hours. Expect 1 to 10 new users. Once you start hitting about the 50 user range, you can start thinking about marketing. You need to think about how to passively bring them in. And then once you actually start hitting a critical mass of people continuing to use the product and kind of contributing to each other's success, you can start thinking about a community. Now, one of the cool things about building on Arweave is that we can actually kind of switch some of these things around. User research and biz dev, I think, still comes first, but you can actually start thinking about community far earlier. Why? Because essentially you have these really interesting tools like profit sharing communities that incentivize users, early adopters in the space, to be personally invested in the success of your product. So it's actually really cool. We'll be covering kind of like how some unique use cases for profit sharing communities and how you can use that for early customer acquisition later. So what are we covering? We have some assumptions. You've got a product, it works, and it's ready for users. A proviso on this, like kind of like a little disclaimer, is that you should not be waiting to talk to people who would be using your product until it's ready. You should be building you should be building with the users. If you wait up until the point where it's ready and you're ready to go to an MVP to find out what the potential users might be thinking about it, you've waited too late, right? You've already baked a ton of assumptions into the core product. So I would strongly recommend talking to people beforehand, but this talk is not about product strategy and product design. I have another talk about that. I can send you a link to the video. Again, join the Discord. I can post a link to that as well. But this is actually about customer acquisition, and you cannot acquire customers if you're not ready to start selling services or products. Okay, so you got a product, it works, it's ready for users. You've already onboarded your friends and family and everyone who owes you a favor. Why do we focus on kind of the low-hanging fruit first? It's because you spent a ton of time onboarding them, right? You've learned all the rough patches in your product and you smooth them out. I have been building products for longer than 12 years. 12 years is like kind of how long I've been in the tech space. I've been building things for longer than that. And even I make obvious mistakes, obvious assumptions that would not be, that are solved once I actually start putting it in front of people, right? So it's really easy to make assumptions about how people use it and just kind of build unbeknownst to you that you're incorporating some pretty key and erroneous assumptions. So spend time with friends and family, get those smooth and out of the way. Why? Because they like you and they want you to succeed. Strangers don't necessarily want you to succeed. They're going to have less patience for you. So you want to make the obvious mistakes in front of a friendly audience. If you're reading this and you're like, oh my God, this feels like hobbyist. This doesn't feel like something that I want. Like I've got an idea for a $100 million company. I don't want to spend my time doing this. Look, billion-dollar companies start this way. Okay. Slack talks about how they begged and cajoled their friends at other companies to try it out and give them feedback. Their first 6 to 10 companies were done via this sort of like social network way. So what are we covering? We're covering how to meet people you previously didn't know, how to talk to them about what you're building, how to pitch them on giving your product a chance, and then how to make the most of those chances strangers take on your product. So it's kind of a bing, bang, boom. This is how I think about product design, and this is the 1 and the 5 are kind of where this methodology lives. And then you have define, ideate, and prototype. Again, it's in sort of the previous product talk, which I can link to if you're interested in that. Why do you want to continuously evaluate your design and get closer to certainty? Because you want to make sure you're building the right thing, and not just kind of from like a capitalistic, like, you know, I want to make sure I'm building the right thing because I want to be able to charge people a ton of money, make a lot of money. That is part of it. That is a big part of it, right? But another part of it is essentially to be real with y'all. We only have so many years on this planet, and I want to make sure that I'm spending them building the right thing as opposed to the wrong things, right? Product design, product building in particular can take a lot of time. Building a product is a multi-month endeavor. Building a company is a multi-year endeavor. And you want to make sure that you're spending those months and those years on things that have value. You know, it takes a long time to build a stadium. If you build a stadium and people don't show up, people don't play, people don't buy hot dogs, then what's the point of building the stadium in the first place? So that's kind of why I think about these sort of early steps. I know a lot of people tend to think about research as like this never-ending treadmill of like, oh, well, I talk to people and it's analysis paralysis. It takes forever. The methodology I'm describing literally should be like a week. You know, like it should be a week of your time to validate, and the insights that you derive from it are going to be incredible, and you're really going to get like kind of the pieces that you need to know to move forward. This is honestly, I haven't really seen too many people talk about this sort of like double dipping on product research as well as customer development until I read this book. This is a really interesting, I would say it's not, it's an interesting alternative take. Rob Fitzpatrick is actually an engineer turned CEO. So I think he has like much more of a sales kind of focus in this. So I would definitely say if this approach sounds interesting to you, pick this book up, read it. I think it's got a lot of really good, like out of the box, like here's how you ask these questions. We're going to be covering a lot of the structure, but it's, you know, an hour talk or 40-minute talk is going to try to give some time for Q&A is not the same as a kind of like a complete out of the box solution. So if this sounds good, definitely hit me up on DMs. Happy to like kind of talk you through more of this, but also this book exists and it's a really good overview of some of the methodologies that I'm covering. Some necessarily are my own. So takeaway number one that you need to be aware of is know where your users are. There's two channels. There's open channels and closed channels. Think of open channels as how people talk about their profession to people who are not in their profession or outsiders. And then closed channels are how people talk to, let's say, coworkers or people kind of in similar trades. Reddit, Twitter, Stack Overflow are examples of the open channels. The closed channels, Telegram, Discord, etc. Both are really, really valuable. I would say, especially like it takes some digging, but definitely look for the Telegrams and the Discords for the groups that you want to get into, because I think we cover this later, and maybe I'm killing the lead here, but it's been really interesting to see NFTs explode because you've basically seen like you have seen in some cases, and I want to say all, I think there's some platforms that are very much like made by artists or like very artist centric. But I've also seen a decent amount of NFT platforms where people really don't know the industry. They don't know artists. They don't know any of that. They just know that NFTs are a cool thing and you can take like this cool drawing this person did and like mash it up. And then there you go. You have a marketplace. And it has been fascinating. I'm on my, when I'm not doing tech stuff, I am doing art stuff. I'm a writer and an artist. I do comics. And it's been fascinating to see the collision of cultural, of like semantics, of like how people talk about things and just how distrusting artists are of people building NFT platforms, because you have to understand these are artists that have been basically like driven to like below market wages. It's been commoditized to hell. And then to have like crypto people come in and say, oh, I can commoditize it further. People are very resistant to it. I don't think people in the NFT space are as aware as like kind of like just sort of the negative sentiment that at least some artists have in the circles that I'm in. I've had multiple private conversations with artists about NFTs where I've had to kind of like go back from the beginning. Like, I know you think it's a scam, but basically explaining how it's not a scam and not destroying the environment. So it's been really interesting. How can you use these open and closed channels? One, you can take quantity of conversations as a signal for overall market size. This should not just be like, oh, I have found these communities which have these many thousands of marketers or this many thousands of these type of people, these type of users. You also should be taking what they're talking about as a signal as to whether or not they're actually caring about the direction, like the thing that you want to build in their space. Take what is being discussed as the direction of the market. It's easier and also more difficult now than pre-COVID. With COVID, we have seen a massive influx of online communities take root, both in Clubhouse as well as just in general, right? Like I think we're on. I've never even heard of Gather wasn't a thing 6 months ago. Like on these online spaces, VR spaces, all of these different like ways to build community on the internet weren't a thing 8 months ago. We weren't really thinking in that direction, and now we have to. The problem with that is that everybody's online, so it's really difficult to cut. Like the signal to noise ratio has definitely increased on the signal side, so something to bear in mind. Research. The beauty of it, however, is as you research, even the open communities have incredible insights. Ross Simmons tweets about marketing. He basically says like you can use community curated content to determine what people are really interested in and how people are thinking about it, and that can actually give you some ideas on how to reach out to those communities. And he's speaking specifically kind of like from a content marketing side, but I think from a product side as well, right? If you're seeing a ton of articles about documentation on relatively new protocols, and that tells you that people are still trying to figure out how to do that, which means that there's space for you to automate or to build products around it. So worth considering. Twitter phishing is one of my favorite personal methods. If you're not on TweetDeck, you should be. It's an incredibly powerful tool for Twitter. Twitter's just kind of like, I wouldn't say just choose where you're going to be. Don't be everywhere. Focus on where the most interesting conversations are that also fit your style. Twitter definitely fits my style. And TweetDeck is an incredible, powerful tool for finding conversations and kind of getting market insights, understanding how people are thinking about the space. Within like 20 seconds, I found, like, let's say I wanted to build a product around NFT onboarding, right? And doing like NFT art drops for new artists, right? I found this within 20 seconds of like just setting up a TweetDeck column for it, right? And maybe like your first intuition is like, oh, so that's how I do it, right? I find people who are complaining about the thing and I spam them the link to my product. This is actually terrible. Don't do this. That's actually what's going to bring us to the second piece of this, which is once you find the people, you need to figure out a way to engage them, right? And engaging them isn't just dropping a link. That's why takeaway number 2 is ask for an advice, not a sale. And this is where we actually get into the double dipping with user interviews and business development. I know that I'm speaking to an audience of builders. I am a builder, and generally speaking, most builders that I know are introverts over extroverts. I am definitely an introvert. I'm much more comfortable with a book than at a party. And so it can be tough. This part can be really tough if you are an introvert who's thinking about building a product or a company. Thankfully, you're not the first one to do this. There are some incredible talks about this. This is one of my favorites. This is between Katie and Jay. Both are researchers for Google and Facebook, respectively. So really top of their game. I would say, like, kind of like high quality people, kind of talking about how you identify people who have the advice and the insights that you need to build compelling products and how to get in front of them. Jay especially, I think, just had some really fascinating ideas on how she located and talked to people, hard to get professionals. Again, link in the deck. Deck will be linked in Discord, so be sure to join Discord. So instead of saying, hey, check out my link, right? Which this has happened multiple times to me whenever I bring up a thing, and it drives me crazy. I might accidentally mute the people that spam me their projects whenever I'm just kind of like riffing on something, right? Instead, reach out and say, hey, I'm super bummed to hear that. I'm actually working on some ideas around NFTs and how to make them better. Would you be up for a quick call? Would love to hear more about your terrible experience and how it could be better. The guards come up whenever they feel like a sales pitch is coming. The guards come down whenever you ask for advice, because people they like helping other people. They like giving advice. And actually, at this stage of your product, insights are a lot more important than payments. Best possible case, if I had just dropped him a link, is that he hits my site, he tries it out. It's okay. He's pretty cool. He may remember it later. He might not. That's it. Besides that single impression and that single sale or that single airdrop, that monthly active user that I can count over the next 30 days and no further, I really don't derive much benefit from it. Whereas if I get him to sit down with me and talk to me for any amount of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long, he will start filling me in on why he needs the product that you're building and why he's encountering the problems in the first place. Another thing to remember whenever you're building your product is that there are probably 5 other teams working on an idea extremely similar to yours. It's just a fact of life. It's kind of the reason that multiple light bulbs were invented in the same time. I think it's called spontaneous coordinated invention, something like that. I just finished the Edison biography by Chernow. Is really good, but they kind of covered all that, and it's really just a conflagration of the technology progressing to a certain point, people talking about things in a certain way, and then sort of like the zeitgeist sort of forming to where everyone starts kind of coming up with these ideas in the same manner. All of that to say, what's going to set your product apart is not your idea, but it's going to be the insights, how people are going to be using it, how the market is going to react to it. That's actually going to set your product apart from these other 5. Execution and insights tend to separate these companies, not necessarily the ideas that they have. Customer interviews can be anything from 5 minutes to 50 minutes. It's easy to overthink. It just boils down to asking questions and listening to users. Having a script, I think, is a third thing, and I probably need to add to this, but have a script so that it's not just kind of a freewheeling, because you want to normalize the data. At the interview, don't make this an overly academic exercise. You're exploring the problem space from their perspective and looking for opportunities to deliver value. And then there's easily another 10 plus hours of study. There's a ton of really good books on this. It's in the appendix. So if this is an interesting avenue of study for you, honestly, whenever people ask me like, hey, what's the 80-20 for product design? Like where's the most value derived from the entire practice of product design? I think the instinct, the impression that I have from people is that like, oh, it'd be like the user testing, right? It's like, it's de-risking the product whenever it goes out. In my opinion, that's not it at all. In my opinion, these early user research and like co-design explorations are actually the 80-20. This is where it's incredibly useful. This is where you kind of like derive most of the value, like the really powerful insights from product design as a practice is from here. So the interview structure, however much time you have, explore the problem space 80% of the time. The other 20% of the time, you're testing the value pitch. When you explore the problem space, 80% of the time, start with the 5 whys. This is a really, really easy methodology that will actually give you some incredible insights, right? If you could start essentially just by asking like, so I heard you had problems. Why did you have problems? And they'll say like, well, I was trying to do this NFT airdrop and I didn't have like my desktop. I only had my phone. It was kind of a pain in the ass. Cool. Why didn't you have your desktop? Why were you on your mobile phone? If you stopped at that first one where it was like, oh, like desktop versus mobile, you could just say like, oh, we have to launch with a desktop app, right? That's a decent insight right there. But if you continue to dig, if you continue to ask 5 whys, you can actually find out more. An example would be like, as we continue to ask the 5 whys, we found out around a specific context. We found out that when we were doing a research study with Bitcoin miners, we found out that like some of them had very specific structures on how they run their operations because of like fluctuations in energy costs, et cetera. Like you really start getting into the nitty gritty, which bubble up into interesting insights that you can use to make a better product and think of things that honestly your competition hasn't thought of. Be curious, let them speak. I know it's really tempting if you've got something that you're super jazzed about to talk to them the whole time, but actually, honestly, the insights come from letting them talk. So it's be curious and ask questions. Record plus take good notes and bring a friend. If you have a co-founder, this is a must. Like you can get derive a lot of these benefits just from recording. But if you can bring a friend, you can focus on asking questions and the other person can actively listen. I just finished Never Split the Difference, which is an excellent book. In a hostage negotiation, the FBI has up to 5 people listening in on the conversation and then passing notes back and forth, right? And it's not that they're like reading something. Like it's easy to think like, oh, they must be like hacking the database or something or finding out things that person doesn't know. No, they're literally just listening to what is being said and then they're suggesting directions to move the conversation. So active listening is really difficult. Active listening while you're having a conversation and you're trying to like make sure you're answering all the questions that you have in your script is really difficult. So bring a friend if you can. If you can't record, focus on the guiding the conversation side, and then active listen kind of after the fact. We have a template back whenever I was running grants over at Consensus Investments. We had a template for these type of interviews. You kind of has a boilerplate plus like kind of an example of how you would structure this sort of research thing, again, linked in the deck. And then finally, the value pitch, the last 20%. I know some of you are thinking, finally, I can talk. Not really. Actually, the value pitch, the last 20%, it needs to be a 30-second elevator pitch with an ask toward the end goal. So these are different if the end goals are revenue or user growth. Why is this? This is like kind of like an overcomplicated way of saying essentially asking people what they think of the idea is kind of it's kind of worthless, right? Best case scenario is someone's going to say, oh, I think it's really interesting, or that's really cool, or that could be really neat. When you dig deeper, like I've had people say that in the interview where I basically said like, cool, okay, it's interesting. Would you want to pay for it? I'd be like, oh no, it's not for me, right? If it's interesting, but it's not for them, then it's not interesting, right? So you have to basically like, when you ask them to respond to the value pitch, you need to ask for like a skin in the game type of signal. It can be signing up for beta. It can be introductions to other people who do similar things. If you're trying to build like a community or build a user base, sign up for future updates. And if they say no, this is actually almost as good, maybe even better than if they say yes, right? Because then what you do is you thank them for their honesty, because saying no to someone is actually really difficult. Society, we're very much socialized to tell people what they want to hear. So if they say no, you thank them for their honesty. You ask them, like, what about this isn't necessarily for you? And then they'll say something to the effect of, they could say something like, well, it just doesn't really fit our business structure. Be curious, say like, oh, interesting. Like, what would fit your business structure? Or what kind of businesses do you think this would apply to? You could discover completely new customer segments if they say no. So again, even no's are opportunities in this setting. Which brings me to takeaway number 3: build relationships and then communities. Value exchange is a two-way street. Do stuff for free. This is really just about building up, building value and building interest in the products. Co-create with users. This to me is like one of those powerful underutilized practices I see, not just in Web3 but Web 2. Is just like, if you're in the same room with them, like, whiteboard with them what a solution would look like to their problems. If you're not in the same room, you can do that pretty easily over Figma or Miro or any other kind of digital whiteboarding tool. But like, co-create with the users. Micro experiences, industry reports are another good way, but think of ways in which to test out the hypothesis and the value that you're creating, then deliver it into the ecosystem and see how people react. It's a value for value exchange. So even email signups at this point are kind of a painful. They're high value. With everyone moving to Substack, with 1,000, me literally receiving like 50 marketing emails a day, I am extremely hesitant to give my email out to any service for the foreseeable future. And it's because of COVID. It's because everything has moved online. So you have to have a really compelling value, even to start capturing beta email signups at this point. So start thinking in that direction. How do you know what people need? It's by them signaling via email or other methods. Unique opportunities building on Arweave. So PSTs plus communities is one of the most interesting developments, I think, in the space. It's why I'm really excited to work with the team. Profit sharing communities, we've seen some really interesting experiments within products on Arweave itself, where essentially like they've used profit sharing tokens to experiment with features, to test out features. I think Ardrive did basically a QA rush basically on their platform back in November, December, where PSTs were part of the reward system. It's incredible. A really, really interesting way to start incentivizing people to utilize the space. And there's the endowment effect, right? Psychologically speaking. So whenever people feel like they have a vested interest in the product succeeding, they're much more likely to invest in it via their time, via their feedback, etc. My Discord, I think, my Discord use has definitely exploded since I started working with Arweave. I think every community has started a Discord, and each one of those is a really unique way to start building people who feel ownership and investment in the products that you're building, just in a really light touch manner. So part of the reason I think I'm so bullish on profit sharing communities is because you don't have to wait until you have 500 to 1,000 people kind of building in the space and delivering value to each other, making each other successful. You can actually do it much earlier in the stack, which is really exciting. And then weekly one-on-ones. This is really just a call out for the Foundry itself. We are scheduling weekly one-on-ones. So if you want to talk to us, if you want to talk to us specifically about some of these strategies, happy to do so. But yeah, we're basically helping teams sort of benchmark their performance and based off of the type of product that they want to build, the type of projects, and kind of sprint towards that. So community is the new moat. This is a really good piece by Astasia Myers. And economic moat is a business's ability to maintain its competitive advantage over alternatives. This is especially true in crypto because of the interoperability between everything. I think if you were, again, last year, right, the SushiSwap Vampire Protocol attack on Uniswap, right? That's fascinating. And really, the people who did not switch over were the people who believed in Uniswap, who had who felt ownership of Uniswap and felt like they wanted Uniswap to succeed. That is what protected Uniswap from necessarily all of their liquidity being drained, was the community that they had built around it. There is a great, I think I link it here. Scott Galloway, he's kind of risen to prominence lately under, I would say, like less desirable terms, just in terms of like kind of a boomer fretting about Bitcoin prices or Wall Street bets or whatever. But he's actually a really, really insightful marketer. He teaches at NYU. I've really enjoyed kind of his marketing series, and he talks about how essentially there's a shift in loyalty happening kind of market wide, where people just aren't as people are not loyal to brands anymore. They're loyal to communities. Part of it has to do with search and Amazon. It's really interesting. The video is actually, I believe the video is linked in the appendix here, but it's worth checking out. The sooner you can start building a community around your product, I think the more successful you'll be. Finally, be creative, iterate, and find your own strategy. One of the problems that I have whenever I pass these workbooks and kind of like these talks over to people is they start doing it, they run into a blocker, and they say like, oh, wow, well, I guess this just doesn't work. This is a starting point. These are things that have worked for me, but honestly, in order to be successful, you have to be creative, you have to iterate, and you have to find your own strategy. It makes as much sense that you could copy and paste a business, like a customer acquisition strategy, and build a successful company, as it does that you could copy and paste code from Stack Overflow and build innovative technology, right? Like, you have to, if the results were common, then everyone would be doing it, but the results are uncommon, meaning your strategies and your methodologies have to be uncommon as well. So I would just encourage you, fall in love with the customers, fall in love with the problem that you're trying to solve, get really passionate, get as passionate about that as you are about the technology and the craft of building it in the first place. And I think you will just naturally innovate and do some amazing things. So this list isn't exhaustive. Back whenever I gave this talk first, this was down. He hadn't renewed the domain. Well, guess what? It's open. It's up. Do things that don't scale.com. This, I think, is just a really fun list of things that you can kind of review, other interesting growth, like customer acquisition strategies from mostly a Web 2 space. So it might actually give you some really interesting ideas with some of these strategies, if there's like a Web 3 component or an extra dimension that you can kind of like layer on top of it. Further reading about user research and biz dev, cold calling for introverts, and the mom test, about marketing. This is Marketing by Seth Godin. I think the whole book is kind of meant to be a marketing book, but I think he actually wrote a fantastic book about building products. It's great. Microclass, Brand Strategy, and How Amazon is Dismantling Retail by Scott Galloway. Also really good. To Sell is Human by Daniel H. Pink is actually really good, especially if you kind of had a derogatory view of sales in general. It's actually a really helpful book to think of it in terms of how everybody is selling. About community building, Peter Pan, Building Decentralized Community. It was a talk he actually gave at Arweave. I consider Peter one of the community masters. He's just brilliant when it comes to that. He actually just dropped a new article about bootstrapping grants programs to build, incentivize community building. So definitely check that out as well. I'll probably add that to my further reading list once I have a chance to go through it. Communities of the New Moat, case study, indie hackers. This to me is really just an interesting case study. I would just kind of look at the rise of indie hackers because in their case, their product was the community that they built, which I thought was really interesting. And then Working in Public by Nadia Erkbal. Again, I know I said this last time, I haven't read it yet. I've heard it's tremendous. It's on my short list of books to read. I will be getting to that eventually, but yeah, that's what I'm talking through. Thanks everybody. That's all I've got to say. I'm on Twitter. My DMs are open if you want to talk. I'm also on Discord, #JustSack. Yeah, happy to kind of work through